Gran Saga is the latest anime MMO release. It was a game that I have been excited for years. Back when Tower of Fantasy was announced, back when Blue Protocol was announced, Gran Saga was announced. This is a game that a friend of mine, Cry, and I covered extensively. We love anime MMOs, so this was right up our alley. After having played it for the last 3 to 4 days, I can say with utmost certainty that this is by far one of the most mobile MMOs that I've ever played. I don't want to do a full dedicated review on the game because ultimately I don't think I'm qualified. I think you need to hit endgame to fully experience everything the game has to offer before you can make a sufficient, adequate review of the game, and I just don't have it in me to do that. The reason for that is because it just wasn't enjoyable. And instead of doing an all-encompassing review, I'm just gonna go ahead here and tell you what I liked and what I didn't. That way, you can get a gauge of whether or not you should even invest time into playing. Now, if this is your first time here, consider subscribing to the channel, hitting the little bell notification. That way you remain up to date with every single thing that I post, and I post daily. Do not miss out. Let's start off with what I like the most: the graphics. I am a huge fan of anime MMOs. I loved the aesthetic of Blue Protocol. I loved the aesthetic of Tower Fantasy. I loved the aesthetic of Gran Saga. And even after playing it for the last several days, I still do. I think that Gran Saga is essentially Tower Fantasy 2.0. It looks better, it feels better, it just doesn't play better. I think the world, the scenery, the environment are stunning. This is a game that could have been so much fun to play if you could actually play it. You have enormous open zones, an open world to explore, and you really don't. You don't. The game is autoplay, auto combat, so you have this stunning world that you can just freely run around, and all you're doing is letting the AI move you from hub A to hub B to hub C to hub D, not contributing anything, not interacting or engaging with anything in the world. So you have these incredible looking environments, but there is zero purpose to them. The character models look great. They really, really look great. For an anime MMO, this is probably one of the better looking ones out there in terms of character models. There are a plethora of different characters that you can recruit, that you can use, weapon types that you can use, that you can deploy. It's genuinely shocking to me that this is cross-platform compatible with mobile. The narrative is very good. It is, for all intents and purposes, a JRPG. I love a story in my MMOs. I think that a compelling narrative grips me, enthralls me, and keeps me motivated to continue playing. If a game has a terrible story, I'm not really going to be very involved in it. I'm going to skip through the story, and then after I get bored, I'm just going to leave because I have no connection with the characters, I have no connection with the world. Gran Saga has a great story. It's a little convoluted, admittedly, and is really, really elongated, but I mean, that's pretty traditional when it comes to JRPGs, so it's not entirely unexpected. And then finally, the Japanese voice acting was phenomenal. It always is. Whenever you get an MMO, whenever you get a gacha game, a video game in general, an anime, and you hear a Japanese dub, you know it's gonna be good. And that's it. That is about everything good, positive that I could say about the game. The negatives, the autoplay. Yes, you can disable autoplay, but for the majority of the game, you don't need to. You can grind automatically. You can route path automatically to quests. You can auto dungeon, you can auto everything. Now, I will preface this by stating that as you progress through the game, when you get to the much more difficult content, auto becomes more of a detriment than a benefit. So you do require manual play for the more difficult content, but for a lot of content nonetheless, you do make full use of the auto feature. So you're not really playing a lot of the game. If you require autoplay in a game to grind for materials, to grind for resources, gear, just general monsters, to stretch out the length of the game, to artificially inflate content, then it's just bad game design. You could very easily remove that content from the game and put something more meaningful in there to consume player time. to maintain player retention. Auto grinding doesn't accomplish that. Auto grinding doesn't accomplish anything other than keeping people logged in, but not actually in the game. Before we go any further, let me take a moment here to thank my incredible patrons over on Patreon and my YouTube channel members who allow for me to continue to do dedicated videos like this every single day. You guys are phenomenal, and I can't thank you all enough for the support. Now let's keep talking. The quests were incredibly basic. They weren't even like kill 15 monsters. They were bare bones quests to propel you from narrative event to narrative event. That was it. That was the bulk of the questing. There was zero purpose to the world. There was zero purpose for quests. There was zero purpose to do anything realistically other than, you know, like essentially ride in the passenger seat of a vehicle on a mount, see the beautiful scenery, and then be told this story. Like, it's a visual novel. It's a beautiful narrative experience, but that's it. It didn't seem like or play like a video game. Now, I did not participate in all of the available content, but from what I did, there was very little that I had to actually do. There was very little realistically MMO content in any capacity. I had MRSSSTIX, my wife, in my party. I partied with like 1 or 2 other people and did nothing. Nothing at all. Everything we grinded for by ourselves. There was a limitation in terms of actually being able to invite people to the party that was imposed onto people individually, where I believe you had to hit like level 20 or something to actually group with people, which meant we spent the first couple days playing through the game individually, when this is a massively multiplayer game. It's supposed to reinforce that multiplayer component, and it just didn't. It wasn't there. And again, this might be very different later on. I never got to experience the later game content because it was just so boring getting there that I didn't feel like continuing. And if an MMO cannot captivate you, cannot maintain and retain your attention, then how are they going to expect you to keep playing it? Every person that I know dropped the game. Not because the game was horrible by any stretch of the imagination, but because the game was boring and it just felt so single player friendly. Now, there are a lot of interesting mechanics present, like the grand weapon system, where you essentially roll for weapons via gacha that is kind of similar to Tower Fantasy, and then you can use them and equip them and transform yourself, and it is all very cool. But at the end of the day, when everything is being done automatically, it felt like it was something that was entirely underwhelming. This, I think, as a game would have functioned a lot better as a single player gacha game, because that's what it feels like. A single player gacha game with tons of people out in the world, all auto playing, and the ones that aren't are playing the game individually, not with you, not with their friends. I think at the end of the day, all I can say is this didn't feel like an MMO. It looks very high quality. It's a very beautiful game. There is some manual play involved when you actually push through and progress significantly further through the game, but getting to that point is a trial. It is an arduous process that I know most people aren't going to bother to do unless they're mobile game players, because this game, while cross-platform compatible, does feel very mobile, unfortunately. And if I were to rate this game based on it being a mobile MMO, I can tell you with 100% certainty, this is one of the best anime mobile MMOs out there. With regards to it being a PC MMO, this is one of the better anime PC MMOs, but that isn't saying much, given anime MMOs, even on PC, are some of the worst MMOs available. This is not a top 10 title. This is not a top 20 title. This is barely passable as a PC MMO, but again, as a mobile MMO, even as a cross-platform MMO, I'd say this is a very good game that you should definitely try out. But if we are basing this off of PC and comparing it to World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV, Guild Wars 2, Black Desert, The Elder Scrolls Online, this fails in every aspect except for narrative, voice acting, and the world itself. Hey you, where do you think you're going? Don't you close out of this tab. I didn't give you permission to do that. Sit your ass back down. Click one of the 2 videos that are gonna be on screen in just a moment and keep watching my content. Keep enjoying my content.